Hey, everybody. Happy Sunday. Happy New Year's. Cheers. I hope outside of present circumstances, things have been as good as they can possibly be. If you're anything like me, New Year's evening was a bit of a bittersweet moment. I was watching the coverage, and it was just eerie watching absolutely no one out in Times Square and watching the networks try and pretend like everything was normal and, as if we were in the middle of a societal changing pandemic. It was so weird, but I'm glad to be in 2021. I'm glad to be out of that hell year. And then meanwhile, January 3rd, 3 days out from the certification of the Electoral College, which, by the way, needs to go away. Nick and I were talking about this on the Mike Craig podcast the other day. There's no reason why we have this moment coming up on the 6th, where now all of a sudden we all have to sit here on our asses and wait and see if the Republican Party is going to certify the will of the people. Crazy. Absolutely crazy that we still do this thing. And it's important to mention because people are saying this on social media, and it's important to get this out there. They're like, oh, if the founders knew about this, they'd be turning over in their graves. Absolutely not. I talked about this in American Rule. The Electoral College is there to, have the powerful and the wealthy decide who is president, make sure that we don't make any mistakes because we are so stupid. We are so stupid, and we should not be trusted with power, and we should not be trusted with politics. We shouldn't be in this situation to begin with. And the fact that we're now sitting here waiting on this thing to happen is just another indictment of a broken ass system, a completely broken system, and not just a broken system. And we have a ton of questions about this coup tonight. But it's important to point out that the Republicans have every incentive to do what they're doing. Every incentive. There's no reason for them not to do this outside of good faith in their own consciences, which, by the way, they've shown that they don't have. They have no principles. They have no interest whatsoever in maintaining even a shred of representative democracy. There is no reason for them to play by the rules. The Democrats have not given them a reason to play by the rules because all this time there's like, all right, alarmist, don't. They're good people. When the right person gets in office, don't worry, they'll play ball. Don't worry about that. The media continues to have them on their shows, even today. After the Republican Party has coalesced behind an anti-democratic attempt to steal the election. They had them on today on their damn shows to get on and spew their bullshit. There's no reason for the Republican Party to play by the rules. There's no reason for the Republican Party to ever accept an electoral loss again, which, by the way, is all that's going to happen in the future because they have no base whatsoever anymore. And we've talked about this multiple times. They don't have a base anymore. They have a dwindling white supremacist base, and it's going away. But they have no reason to accept elections anymore. Absolutely, I've heard the tapes. Oh, we're going to talk about the tapes at length tonight because we have to. Which, by the way, before we get into that, I just want to say, before we get into this, because there's a lot to go over tonight. This is a packed bourbon talk, which is good because we're going to take next week off. Maybe. I don't know. Who even knows? Who even knows if we'll have a representative government or a semblance of it next week? I have thoughts on what we're getting ready to go through, but this is a jam-packed thing, but we have to talk about this before we get into anything. Number one, thank you for doing this. And thank you for the support that you've been showing. It has been, and today has been very frustrating. And the past couple of days have been very frustrating. And I mean, the past couple of years have been frustrating. What am I saying? There's been a lot of us who have been calling it like we see it and talking about what's getting ready to happen. And we've been studying this. We have not been talking out of our asses. We have literally just been observing what's happening and speaking honestly and going off of the things that we have learned and our research and the patterns that we have seen. And it has been really lonely. It was really lonely there for a while in particular, and I talked about this, and I'm not going to talk about the people who, I'm not going to name names tonight of the people that I've talked to and the conversations we've had, but I have to tell you that the people who have been on this beat for a while, it has been lonely and it has been really, really hard. And I take absolutely no solace in talking about this stuff and talking about where this thing was going. I think that's the difference between the people on the left who have been calling this thing and QAnon, besides a bunch of different things, is on one hand, the important thing isn't being right. The important thing is having a better country and having better lives for people. And this thing has been so lonely and so hard. And I have to tell you that, like, the people who are watching tonight and who have been supportive and who have said so many nice things and so many kind things and who have built this really inspiring community, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I hope that you're okay. And I know that this is a really stressful time and a terrifying time. We're walking into the 6th, ready for anything. Just ready for anything. Ready for whatever is coming, whatever may come. And the unfortunate truth is that we have to be ready for literally anything to happen over the next few days and next few weeks and next few months, next few years. This is not going to lay off for a while. It is abundantly clear that we are on the precipice of something very, very large and very dynamic and possibly very cool and possibly very awful. But I just want to say thank you for that, because being alone with this stuff and not having people to talk about this with and go over this with and examine it with and commiserate with and really, really absorb it and live and exist within it. I don't know if I could have done it. I was thinking about that a lot before New Year's Eve, like what I was grateful for this year. It's a really hard year in a lot of different ways, but I just want to say thank you again. You mean a lot to me. So thank you. It's incredible that we've arrived at this point where there's no reason for one of the major political parties to ever accept election results again. There's no reason. And the Republican Party, I mean, that's, I've talked about this a lot. Ted Cruz knows that Donald Trump lost the election of 2020. He knows. Howley knows. Most of these assholes know that Trump lost this election and that there is absolutely no proof whatsoever of fraud. And meanwhile, they go out and they're peddling this whole thing because they need to keep hold of Trump's base. They need to continue fundraising. A lot of them have presidential aspirations that need to be there. They don't want to be singled out as deep state traitors. They know what they're doing is wrong. There's no reason not to. The entire downside at this point is to say, no, Trump, you lost the election. But that's what these people are doing. They've made a political and financial calculation. Yeah, they know he lost. Trump has gone around the bend. If you listen to that recording, Trump's gone. And I talked a lot about this, that somebody like Donald Trump, and I talked about this with Mary Trump a little bit. The line between Trump lying and the delusional belief in what he's saying, it's so thin, and he crosses over so quickly. Trump's gone. Trump is so lost in his own bullshit that he can't possibly find his way out. And what we heard in the tape today, I'm so glad that we heard it. But I can also tell you it was 8:09 p.m. Eastern, a few hours after we've received this. The fact that the entire world isn't on fire right now should terrify you. Why are the Democrats not crawling up the walls right now? Why is the media just talking about like, this is concerning and we'll have to see how this plays out over the next few days? This is a president who tried to pressure a Secretary of State to change an election, threatened him. And on top of that, I mean, God, what is time? A week and a half ago, a week ago, he floated the idea of a military coup in the Oval Office of the White House. What in the hell are we doing? What in the literal hell are we doing sitting here in the midst of this, pretending like anything is okay? And I have to tell you, I was watching this whole, I want to say the top trending thing in Twitter the last time I looked was this story about somebody talking about with a can opener. They're calling it Bean Dad, whatever in the hell it is. We are so lost in entertainments and illusions and bullshit that doesn't matter. And meanwhile, the president of the United States is actively trying to steal an election. It is shameful. It is shameful and it is infuriating. It is infuriating that we have reached this point. But it was almost inevitable because it's all about spectacle. It's all about spectacle. We are so lost in a hall of mirrors and paying attention to entertainments and paying attention to spectacle and paying attention to the wrestling match that politics has become. We have lost track of reality. Meanwhile, and it has to boil down to financial incentive, and I'm sorry, but that's true. When you really talk about this stuff, it has to boil down to financial incentive. The Republicans have every financial incentive to push conspiracy theories and to never accept an election again because they can't win them. The democratic process is passing them by. I've talked about this. When a power group loses the democratic institutions, they tell the democratic institutions to take a hike. They don't give a shit. That's their financial incentive. There's no reason for them not to do it. Meanwhile, by the way, I mean, you see Lynn Wood, who's talking about a firing squad for Mitch McConnell and every other Republican. That's its own financial incentive. Mike Flynn has his own financial incentive. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And you have an entire media political apparatus that has a financial incentive to pretend like none of this matters. Meanwhile, I'm an alarmist. Meanwhile, people like me are alarmists. We are alarmists because we've been telling everyone every step along the fucking way what was going to happen with this thing. And I have to tell you, it hasn't been hard. Like I have like the historical and the political background. That's why I'm able to like make the connections that I am. Everybody who has had their eyes open and has been honest has seen this coming every step along the way. I'm so sick of it. I'm so angry with the way this world is working right now. And it's so damn wrong. It's so damn wrong. And it's all about financial incentive. It's all about financial incentive. People don't want to start having conversations about how the system and the institutions are sick. Because if they did, I mean, my God, you might have to take a look at them. You might have to reconsider how our economy works and how jobs work and the fact that it's completely unequal for a purpose. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And the people who should be ringing the alarms and yelling out fire can't because they don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to be alarmists because my God forbid you don't get published in the New York Times anymore or the Washington Post. I learned that lesson. a while back. I had a few opinion columns published in the New York Times. Guess when they stopped publishing me? I had an opinion column that was going to come out in the New York Times. It was scheduled. My third opinion column that was going to come out in the New York Times, and I started calling this out for fascism. All of a sudden, they stopped answering the emails because that makes you an alarmist. If you start talking about fascism, if you start talking about white supremacy, if you start talking about actual institutional problems in this country, they don't answer your phone calls anymore. They don't talk to you anymore. You don't necessarily get invited on the TV anymore. Because you're an alarmist, and my God, sir, you got to have decorum. You got to have decorum. It's horseshit. It's absolute horseshit. And this whole thing is just one financial merry-go-round. It's absolute horseshit. I didn't plan on talking about that opinion column tonight, but I'm hot. I'm pissed off, man. The fact that Donald Trump could be elected president of the United States is bad enough. The fact that all of these people have stood by and dealt with this and just let it happen. And now, 3 days out, what in the hell is going to happen on the 6th? We got to talk about that tonight. We got to talk about what to expect. But why would the Republicans stop? There's no reason for the Republicans to stop. None. They have every financial incentive to keep it going and keep it going and keep it going. You're even watching Fox News go further right. Told you that was going to happen. You know why? Because it was predictable this entire time. The right has every incentive to just hit the gas. So here's the question. Are we going to do something about it? Are we going to make this thing better? Because I have to tell you, if we don't do something about this, if we don't start actually looking at ourselves in the mirror, if we don't actually start reckoning with this existential crisis, and if we don't start fighting for a better, more human future, we're fucked. We're fucked. That's a true story. There is no reason on January 6th, 3 days from now, there's no reason for the Republican Party to play ball and act in good faith. None. Oh, we're going to unpack fucked. We're going to talk about that in a second. I tell you again, and I say this all the time, and I only say it because I mean it. I'm not peddling false hope. I actually am hopeful. I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been doing a lot of research for a new project. I've been looking at things. I've been looking at trends. I actually think that there's hope here. I actually see a way forward. I actually see a way that this thing can get better. But I have to tell you that we're not going to get better, and we're not going to have a better future until we recognize the actual shit that we're in. Just saying. Got to recognize it first. You can't solve a problem until you diagnose it. Just can't. So I'm hot tonight, and I'm glad you're here, and I'm appreciative of you. We're going to go through some questions. We have a whole slew of things to talk about, all of them around. But thank you very much, and I still think we're going to pull this thing out, but this should piss you off. I'm sorry. I am so sorry that we do not have a better system than this. And I'm so sorry that we don't have better institutions than this. I'm so sorry we don't have better political parties than this. It sucks. We shouldn't be waiting around for the 6th like this. So awful. Dory says, are we doomed, Jared? Which, by the way, what a hell of a way to start off, right? Are we all going to die? But for real, what is up with Trump's telephone call to Georgia's secretary? He's playing his role. I talked about this for a long time. It's professional wrestling. You play an illusion, you play a grift, and then all of a sudden it's not an illusion anymore. It's not a grift anymore. You exist in your own reality. He has come completely around the bend from being a person who lied about winning the election, and he did it because, and this goes back to the financial incentive, he lied about having the election stolen from him, knowing that he lost. And he knew before the election that he was probably going to lose. He lied about it so he could have more money and influence after the election to get himself a better spot, either with OANN or Newsmax or maybe even Fox News if they came and begged him really, really good. But now he believes that the election was stolen from him. And the only thing he cares about is himself. He doesn't care about the country. He doesn't care about what comes after him. He is a narcissist. He dies, the entire world dies. He doesn't care about that. All he cares about is getting what he wants. That call, I can't even imagine the amount of people who have gotten a call like that from Donald Trump. Just wears people down, just yells at them, threatens them, talks to them until eventually they're like, all right, rich boy. All right, rich white boy. We'll take care of you. We'll fix whatever it is. You'll get whatever you want. We'll do your bankruptcy the way you want. We'll set you up with a choice little trust fund, whatever you need. We'll give you a golden parachute. That's fine. That's fine. We'll give you the election. My God. That's what that was. And if you listen to it, he says to him, he's like, you're a Republican. He's saying, put your party over country. And it's not even like the party actually has any principles left. They're not real. Like, the Republican Party isn't pro-life. It's not fiscally conservative. It's not socially conservative. It's not pro-troop. It's not anything. It's all about power. It's all power and profit. That's all they care about. And he was saying, come along, do what you need to do. Maybe you recalculate. Maybe you just realized that you could recalculate and give me the election. And then there we are. That's what that call was. It was harassment. It was threatening. You should go to fucking jail. In a country that worked, he'd go to jail. That's legit talk. And people don't want to have that conversation because he's the president. My God, Jared. Refer to him as Mr. President. He should go to jail. That's what that was. That's exactly what that was. Lucy said, should the Dems impeach him again after today's tape release? Yeah. Yeah, in a country that worked. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party is like, well, let's use some restraint and let's just get over the next couple of days and we'll end up over here and everything will be fine. He's done. Don't worry about him. He's just raging. He's throwing a tantrum, whatever. He should be impeached. He should go to jail. That's what should happen. All the games should stop. And that's what this is. They're games. Everybody in politics right now is engaged in a game. It's all just playing games for leverage and power and profit. Meanwhile, they're like, we'll get past it. We'll get past it. Don't worry about it. It'll be totally fine. That's an impeachable offense. They should be drawing up the fucking paperwork tonight. He should go to jail. He should be thrown out of office. He should go to jail. Because you know what doesn't happen? If it doesn't happen, why wouldn't anyone else do this in the future? It sets a precedent. We have a pretty good ghost. We have a pretty good guest scheduled for the Muckrake podcast tomorrow. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about the precedent that crimes set when they do not get addressed. And what Trump has done here. If somehow or another, knock on wood, we manage to get out of this situation, it doesn't stop there. We're all told, and this is how unfortunately Americans, and particularly Democrats, look at politics. It's like, one election at a time. It's every 4 years. It's every 2 years. And then you move on, and then you figure it out. And that's the season finale, and then everything resets, and everything's fine. No. Donald Trump has set a precedent in every single way. He has overreached presidential authority. There will not be a president who follows him who will not try and go with that because it opens up power. That is what has happened with the presidency. It just keeps growing in power and scope and influence, and every president after every president just expands on it. It's not a Republican thing. It's not a Democratic thing. The people who get in the office try and use precedent. Trump has already pushed that. That's one thing. On top of that, the corruption is just going to continue because there are no consequences to it whatsoever. None. So why wouldn't the spoils system continue into perpetuity until somebody suffers for it, until somebody has consequences for the spoils system? There's no reason not to. On top of that, why at this point, why wouldn't you ask a foreign adversary to help you in your election? I mean, it's an arms race. Like you would actually, and think about this. For those of you who maybe you're sports fans, I'm a baseball fan. I remember the steroid era really well. And when everything started coming out, everybody started saying, well, I had to do steroids to keep up with those people. Well, so now you got to go out and find a foreign adversary because they're going to do it. So you might as well do it. And you go back and forth and back and forth. And that is what happened with things like Citizens United, with the PACs. He filed lawsuits. Oh, man. Incredible. It has to stop. They have to suffer consequences. I'm sorry. They just have to. It's exactly like game theory. It is game theory. And it's just going to get worse until something happens. And I keep telling people, and again, I don't peddle false hope. I do not expect the Biden administration to prosecute Trump. I'm sorry, but presidents don't prosecute other presidents. It sets a precedent for presidents being prosecuted. But the fact that that's not probably going to happen is only going to make it more likely that more corruption is going to happen in the future and that other people are going to continue to break the law. This whole situation right here, I mean, there is no reason for a Republican to ever accept a loss again. None. Because they've opened the door to every Republican voter and supporter believing that Democrats will steal elections. So why would you ever concede ever again? Why? Why would you ever think about conceding? Why even give that a moment? Oh yeah, he'll hold his rally tomorrow. Absolutely. You couldn't keep him away from that thing. It's going to be primetime TV, which I'm sure the media will enjoy. I mean, there's no better rated TV show than The Fall of America. And the coup attempt, I mean, it's almost like the spinoff series. It was The Fall of America. Now it's the coup attempt. So tune in, everybody. And it's not going to be about the special election, which we'll talk about tonight. It's about Trump. It's about Trump. It's about Trump. That's all it is. And it's just going to continue to get worse and worse. And I keep telling people, if we don't fix this thing, if we don't actually deal with this thing, you are going to get somebody after Donald Trump who is going to be even more dangerous and focused and talented than Donald Trump. By the way, Josh Hawley threw his hat in that ring. Oh, y'all are having a fascist party. I'm in. Count me in, fellas. Oh, Tom Cotton wants it so bad he could scream. Him, Ted Cruz, and Howley, they want it bad. Dan Crenshaw's up there. Tucker Carlson wants it too. A lot of people want it. Charlie Grutter says, do you foresee any line Trump/Cruz/Howley and other Senate Republicans plus the House members won't cross? Will they defend violence on January 6th if it occurs as patriotic acts? Question 2, any chance of Russia cutting the power grid in order to stoke chaos so Trump can stay in office? I'm not going to predict that they're going to cut a power grid. I think that's kind of movie thinking a little bit, like all those certain things happening. There's a flair for the dramatic happening there. I don't see that really happening unless tensions escalate and they need to throw a little bit of gas on the fire. Here's the damnedest thing about the Republicans. Again, they know Donald Trump lost this election. Outside of a few idiots like Louis Gohmert, I'm surprised he makes it to his office every morning. Shocking. I'm shocked he doesn't swallow his own tongue. There's a couple of other people. There's some Yahoo, I want to say he's a Louisiana congressman who, was doing something like by firelight, and he's like, I will go down with Donald Trump and I will defend his presidency to the death, whatever. Those assholes, I don't think that they know. I think that people like Cruz and Howley, I think that they're playing a really dangerous game. They know that he lost, but they have to pretend like they think that he didn't lose in order to keep their financial support and political support. But here's the thing. If it turns into an actual coup, an actual undermining of the election, I mean, whoopsie, here we are. What are you going to do at that point? Just joking, everybody. I think this is very concerning. No. All of a sudden, you're on the wrong side of a coup, my friend. And you did it because you wanted money and political power. You were playing a dangerous game. You played yourself. And that's what these assholes are doing. They are playing a coup, hoping that the coup doesn't happen. That's the damnedest thing about it. There's a whole gaggle of these assholes who have to pretend like they want to carry out an actual coup. But they're hoping like hell that the coup doesn't happen. That's crazy. Think about that for a second. Run that around in your head a little bit. That's insane that that's actually where we are. So if all of a sudden there's violence in the streets, and there's a real possibility we could possibly have that. There's a lot of different scenarios, and somebody asked me a couple questions. We'll talk about it. There's a couple of scenarios where things could get really weird. Would they support it? Well, they sure as shit supported a young kid going out in the streets and killing a couple of people, didn't they? Because you got to keep up appearances. Because it's a purity test. If you're a Republican right now, you got to be game for all of this stuff, or else you're Mitt Romney or you're Jeff Flake. If you don't come to play, and if you're not willing to like really go balls to the wall on this Republican fascism authoritarian game, you're done. You make one wrong move. Look at Fox News. I mean, it is a game. Do not confuse this thing. It is a game. It is a grift. And if they have to stand by and support an actual coup, the actual stealing of an election, they'll do it. Absolutely they will. Otherwise, what are they in this thing for? I mean, Ted Cruz. Think about Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz. Donald Trump sat there and accused Ted Cruz's dad of killing JFK. Donald Trump called Ted Cruz's wife ugly. And meanwhile, Ted Cruz has just been like, I'm sorry, do you need me to clean your boots with my tongue? Because I'm more than happy to do that. Don't worry about my family. If y'all have ever seen one of my favorite political videos out there is when Ted Cruz had, oh man, I've completely forgotten her name. Oh, damn it. The person that he said was going to be his VP. It'll come to me at the wrong time. She was the HP lady. Oh, that's terrible. I can't believe I've just completely jettisoned her name out of my head. I've been worrying too much about people with power. Fiorina? Somebody help me out here. There we are, Fiorina. Yeah. That video where it's like announcing that she is his VP candidate, and she's standing out there hyping up the crowd for him, and all of a sudden she falls off, and Ted Cruz just comes out and doesn't even like help her. That's Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz will knife anybody for political power, period. He's more than happy to help out with this thing. And next thing you know, you had a coup. Well, I guess we won, fellas. What do we do now? If anybody has ever seen The Graduate, it's like the end of The Graduate. You look around, you're like, oh shit, we got what we thought we wanted. We're a dog chasing the car. We got the car. What do we do when you catch the car? You got to make it up as you go along. History is full of people who did not expect to be part of a coup, and then they were part of a coup. And it's like, holy hell, I guess this is what we're doing. Monday says, can you give us a rundown of your concerns about this week? Sure. Also, why isn't the House refusing to CD a member this day they will contest January 6th? They're not going to play hardball. They're totally terrified of playing actual hardball. They're trying to kick the can down the road without having to ever take some sort of a stand, because that would be alarmist. Oh my God. Can you imagine if they actually talked about what was going on in the world and actually addressed it and took an actual stand? I have to tell you, and I haven't talked much about him. It's like Chuck Schumer. I'm so sick and tired of Chuck Schumer. Every time the Republicans pull this thing, or Mitch McConnell pulls one of his bullshit moves, Chuck Schumer stands up in front of the Senate and he's like, I call upon my Republican friends to act with good faith. Go to hell. Like, for real. Like, why do you even want this job? And I know why you want this job. You want this job for the political power and the wealth and the profit. Bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. Start actually recognizing reality in front of your face. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. But you're exactly right. These people are engaged in sedition. And I do not say this lightly. I've been thinking about this all day. I've been giving this a lot of thought today. The moment that we are in, the closest thing in American history to the moment that we are in is the couple of months right before the election of Abraham Lincoln and secession. This was a period of time where a group of Southerners, and this is the important thing that we got to talk about here, is that it's not a regional thing necessarily. There are a lot of different places around the country. Drinking Bell Mead tonight. Good stuff. Right before the Civil War, obviously it was a regional situation where you had the South and they had their own society. They had their agrarian-based, slave-based economy, and they wanted to go ahead and have that over the industrial North. And they wanted to keep hold of the political power that they had been guaranteed through the Constitution, which is one of the reasons why the Constitution needed completely overhauled after the Civil War. is because they gave all of these favors out to the South in order to create a country where they could have power and wealth for white people, white men, actually. Now, that was a regional problem. And what happened right around the Civil War is the South became completely inflamed and drowned in conspiracy theories. They thought John Brown was around every corner. They thought they were going to come in and create these slave riots, and they were going to massacre everybody. There was a massive cabal up in the North that was going to come and take things over. And then on top of it, you had a bunch of media down in the South. You started to have national media and these big regional media conglomerates. And they would go out there and they'd be like, oh, we are different people. We are the South. They are the North. They're coming for us. We have to fight them. We have to protect our sacred honor, or whatever bullshit they talked about themselves. And this whole thing right now is just like that. But it's not just North and South. Obviously, the South is a Republican stronghold concerning the Southern strategy. But now it's all over the place. It's asymmetrical. It's so-called red and blue states. It's communities. It's one neighbor and another. That's where we are right now. That's what we're dealing with right now. It is really eerily like an apt comparison. This moment where we are and what's going on. Yeah, it's crazy what's happening right now. I'm very much worried about what we could be looking at. I kept saying this for months at a time, and I meant it. I wasn't just sitting here like talking. Like we're on the precipice of like some really dangerous stuff. We could see some domestic terrorism. We could see violence. We could see upheaval. We could see riots. I mean, I don't know what's cooking up in Washington, D.C., and we'll talk about that in a second. But it could get really, really bad. It could get really, really bad. The 6th, what I would say is this. I think it's going to be really telling how quickly they get through the contesting of the ballots. The problem is, everybody says, well, they have X amount of time to do this. Why do they have to go back? Why do they have to do anything? Why do they have to obey any rules? These are all social constructs. None of these things are actually concrete. These are things that people have to act within good faith. They're imaginary concepts. Congress is an imaginary concept. A nation is an imaginary concept. Congress is an imaginary concept. If you don't play by the rules, they don't exist. So January 6th, we have a lot of landmines. We have a lot of landmines that we have to tiptoe around on January 6th. We have to get through the certification. We also have to get past the possibility of there being violence. We have to get past the possibility of there being a crisis. We have to get to January 20th. We have to get Biden into power. But on top of that, we have to make changes after Biden gets in power. And by the way, it doesn't all get better simply because Biden is in power. That is a problem. Capitalist messiahism tells us that every year is better than the year before it, and everything just keeps getting better and better. In this case, everyone thinks because it's 2021 and because Joe Biden is going to be president that everything's going to get better. I have to tell you, it doesn't just get better. We have to fight political parties, and this political system we have is not going to change itself. We have to fight for that shit. We have to start trusting each other and building communities in solidarity. And we have to start creating political momentum from the bottom up, from the grassroots up. We got buffering for some people. I've already voted in the runoff. It felt really good. It felt really good to get my... Really? It's buffering for some people. That sucks. Seems pretty good on my end. Hopefully it'll be all right. It felt really good to get my vote in, to get that taken care of. I have to tell you that The election down here has been so gross. It's been so gross. All right, we're all good now. All right. Brent says, with this coming to light, will the Lindsey Graham call to Georgia Secretary of State be reevaluated and lead to him losing his seat? No, it won't. Nothing's going to happen to Lindsey Graham. Eventually, he's going to leave, and that'll be the end of it. Nothing's going to happen to him in this case, unfortunately, even though he is, probably committed his own number of crimes in this whole situation. Shell, can we please chat about how ugly this could get? Is there any potential for a successful coup? Yeah. How can we prepare for upheaval and violence? What do we do next to fix this clusterfuck over the next few years? I'm stressed. First and foremost, I'm sorry that you're stressed. I'm stressed too, and it's hard. And I think that's important to say. That and we have to stop pretending like everything's fine. And just like, hey, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine. We have to stop doing that. We have to start talking about how we actually feel. And that's an important thing in building community. You need to have conversations with people where you talk about what's actually going on and you're actually honest about it. And you talk about how bad it is. Because we've been so afraid to call this thing what it is and to call out this existential, societal, political crisis. If we keep saying that everything's fine because we don't want people to think that we're alarmists, those people think it's crazy too. Those people think that we're in a crisis too. We have to start talking about this. One of the things that we need to understand is that solidarity, like think about a workplace, right? We've all worked in a place that was not healthy. It was dysfunctional. You had a bad boss. It was a bad work environment, something like that. You had to talk to other people about what their experience was. And once you start comparing notes, you realize the problem wasn't you. The problem was the structure. The problem was the environment. Everybody's terrified, particularly in an austerity society. Everybody is terrified, but nobody wants to say it because they don't want to have something bad happen. And it goes back to what Nick and I talked about when we reviewed Network. It's like, just leave me alone in my own house. Everything sucks, but leave me alone in my own house. You have to have conversations with people about how stressed you are and what you're going through and how you're feeling. One of the ways that we're going to build anything here is we're going to talk about the facts that we're talking about. Because once you create solidarity and a learned understanding and a shared vocabulary, you can start to take collective action. You need to talk to people you know. You need to talk about what's going on, and don't be afraid to sound alarmist. Don't be afraid to sound like, whatever these people are calling everyone. It's like, oh, you're crazy, and like everything will be fine. Don't worry, the system will take care of it, and they'll spit Trump out like so much bad food. Bullshit. We know that it won't. We've watched it for years, and you have been gaslighted and abused by the political system, by the media, by journalists, by politicians. You have been gaslit. We have to talk to one another. We have to share experience. I just got a little frog in my throat. You have to share experiences. You have to talk about what you're going through. And you have to create that solidarity and trust and intimacy with one another. I'm sorry that you're stressed. I'm stressed too. This is hard. We are going through multiple levels of trauma and tragedy right now. We're watching 3,000 to 4,000 people die every day. Meanwhile, the corporate conglomerates are telling us, hey, get your ass back to work. You're expendable. Good luck. Or, I don't know, maybe you work in a system where like, the pandemic's real, but maybe it's not real. Maybe it's just a flu. You got people around you who aren't wearing masks. They're talking about it's like the sign the sign of the beast. Any of those types of things. Mark of the beast. That's gaslighting. You're being told that objective reality isn't objective reality. You have to talk to people. You have to have conversations with people. You have to trust these conversations. Whenever you talk to people about what's going on in politics, have an actual honest conversation. I'm stressed. You're stressed. We're all going through trauma and tragedy right now. The atomization is the point. That is exactly right, Sam. We are being intentionally distanced from one another and alienated from one another. That's a capitalist code book right there, man. That is their game plan. Make sure that the employees don't talk to one another. They might start a union. They might start a union if they talk to each other. What are you guys talking about in the break room? Don't let them start a union. Have to have conversations. It could get really ugly. I don't think it's going to work out. I don't think the coup is actually going to occur. I don't think it's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen. It doesn't mean that we have to pretend like this is some sort of fairy tale or ridiculous thing to worry about. We are watching this system put to the point of breaking. We have to be honest about that. We have to admit, like, these people are play acting their way into an actual coup. And if it happens, it happens. All it would take at this point, and this is true, all it would take at this point is a couple of dominoes to go out together. That's all it would take. Trump would keep pushing this thing, and then you would have violence in the street, and then you could have a point of crisis, and then who knows what happens after that. Enough people have to say, yes, I'm up for a coup, and then all of a sudden you're in a coup. I was talking about this with somebody the other day. I can't remember who it was. My apologies if I'm not plugging a podcast. Alternate realities sound crazy until enough people believe in the alternate reality, and then it's just reality. It's how cults become religions. It's how movements happen. Enough people start believing in the alternate reality that the alternate reality becomes real. I keep saying this. It's like QAnon. Yeah, QAnon is absolute batshit crazy. But you know what they say? They say they're going to round up all of the traitors and hang them. Well, my God, you could wake up tomorrow and they could be hanging people from the light posts. All of a sudden, that's not an alternate reality anymore. So it could get bad. How do we prepare for it? There are multiple levels of this. First and foremost, you have to prepare for chaos. You need to be ready for things to happen. I have enough food in my house for like 2 to 3 weeks. Enough water and food for 2 to 3 weeks. You should have that just in general. That's first and foremost. Second thing, you should be talking to people. You should have plans in place, whether or not it's a coup or a disaster or whatever. You need communities that will take care of one another. You have to be able to have a line of people who check on one another. That's it. You need to have people that you can trust. And if you can't find them around you, in your neighbors, in your neighborhood, in your town, start talking to people who are in this chat. Start talking to people over at the Muckrake community. Start to get to know people who trust one another and care for one another. We have to start doing that. We have to repair the alienation. That's first and foremost. Second of all, you have to be ready for whatever comes next. And, I have a lot of questions in here, and I'll go ahead and throw them in, and I'll say the names in a second because I like letting people know, who are asking these questions. Do I think that we should be out meeting the Proud Boys and these paramilitary groups and all of these people in D.C. on the 6th? No, I don't think so. I don't think that we should. I don't think that we should give them fodder for violence. I don't think that we should give them bodies to beat. Oh, I don't know if Pence is going to count the Biden electors. I don't have a clue what he's going to do or what he thinks he's going to do. I really don't. I don't think that we should be out in the streets in D.C. for this thing. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be ready to be out in the streets in a moment's notice. I keep saying this. The moment that this stuff jumps the firewall, the moment that this goes from play coup to coup, we have to be in the streets. Period. And if you can't be in the streets, if you can't, like if you're not able to go out in the streets, you have kids that you need to take care of, you're not able to get to Washington D.C. or wherever, or a major population center or whatever, or you don't feel safe, you need to be able to find some role that you can fill, whether it's in volunteering for calls or text or watching out for people or, keeping track of things online or organizing or communication, something. We have to start being there for each other, and we have to start playing roles just in case. But I have to tell you that this thing, do I think it's going to happen? No, I don't think they're going to pull off a successful coup. But you have to be ready in case they try. Because this could be bad. It could. Sneaking Sally says, what are the scenarios that might play out in Congress on 1/6? Were Trump to declare martial law was the worst case scenario that could arise from that? Is it something we should be legit concerned about? Yeah, he might try to. I keep saying this. when we talk about the military and law enforcement, we paint with a broad brush. We say, will all of them do it or will none of them do it? That's not how this stuff works. There are some people in the military who would go along with that. There are some people in law enforcement who would go along with that. I keep saying one of the saving graces in all of this is that Trump has so alienated the military that they hate his ass. They hate Donald Trump. That helps. That helps. But if he pushes something like that, we could see massive violence. We could see loss of life. We could see bloodshed. We could see street gangs and fascist thugs out in the street. We could see people taking advantage of those situations. That could happen. That could happen. And Pink Iguana says this time they won't, but next time, if they have somebody in there who salutes the right way or who is a veteran, who says all the right things, that's a different scenario. It could be bad. The scenarios I see is I think they're going to try and pull a stunt, but it's not going to work out. That being said, they could jump the firewall. Somebody could come up with some sort of thing. Trump obviously thinks there's a possibility something could happen. I've been watching his communications, the things he's been saying. I've been watching online with the people who know him and the people who are around him. They think that they have something up their sleeve. I don't know what that would be. I don't know what they think is going to happen. But again, and this is important, we're talking about social constructs. Politics is malleable. It can change. Things can happen. If people aren't playing by the rules, if they're not worried about going to jail, they're not worried about getting voted out of office, they're not worried about consequences, things change all the time. That's how coups happen. All the time people are like, oh, a coup couldn't happen in this country. Then it can happen. It could happen here. I don't think it will, but it could happen here. We need to be prepared for that. Heretic in the Sun, how worried should we be about the statement from living former secretaries of defense about the potential use of military against Americans? I'm glad that they did it. I'm glad they came out and did it. A lot of that you need to think about in terms of like road crews who are out like painting the lines on the road. Like they start to erode a little bit and maybe you can't necessarily see the white line and maybe that could lead to an accident or something on a foggy night or a dark night. They're out there putting their markers down and they're just reminding people this is not what the military is supposed to be about. This is not how things behave. This is not normal. Our institutions don't act like this. That was them putting their marker down. It was a reminder. It was like, again, the Joint Chiefs of Staff sending out memos to the military. It said, remember, you pledged an oath to the Constitution, not the President of the United States of America. That happened during the Black Lives Matter movement. That's what the Secretaries of State were doing. And these are not people who, by the way, are interested in being alarmist. These are not people who like being out there pretending like they're like, you know, like they actually are concerned about some of this stuff. Like that should tell you they're actually concerned about this. That's what's actually happening. I think Nashville was an isolated person doing something, but I could be completely wrong. I would be shocked if this person wasn't involved in some online communities that are radicalized and pretty dangerous from everything that I've seen. Jessa has two. One is more dangerous than the other. One, violence expected January 5th and beyond, most concentrated in D.C. What are the chances that the police military will participate or do nothing to actively stop it? The answer to that, and I keep talking about this, the military and law enforcement try and maintain the status quo. That is always what they try and do at all given times, particularly within the country. In this case, I think if we have a crisis and chaos, they're going to try and get people out of the way, period. That's the number one thing, is to get people out. If a crisis happens, if something happens with violence and bloodshed or like, I don't know, widespread violence or asymmetrical terrorist attacks or something bizarre like that, like that's throwing all the cards up in the air and playing 52 pickup and not knowing what you're going to find. That's a really dangerous situation. If that happens on January 6th, we're going to be here on YouTube talking to one another, trying to figure out what the hell is going on. So if that actually does turn into a big, giant crisis, that's something to be concerned about. But I think we already saw with Black Lives Matter that a lot of law enforcement is just going to be like, hey, good luck, white supremacist. See you next week at the House for Cards. Number two, if you could only have one TV show to watch for the rest of your life, what would you pick? Sadly enough, I don't know if this is sad or not, but I have a real affinity for The Office. The Office actually got me through some really hard times in my life. It used to be one of those things where I could, I'd be having some personal troubles, or I wouldn't be able to sleep for a while, and I would just put on The Office. It's just comfort food for me. It got me through a really rough time. So that was my first instinct, is I would probably have The Office. Is probably what I would have around. I know that that's not going to be the most popular thing for sure. Alexa says, what are the QAnon Proud Boys and MAGAs talking about doing on January 6th? So I've been keeping tabs on a lot of the far right, and they're different. They're different. QAnon right now just expects this thing to work out. I mean, the military and intelligence are going to take care of it. So don't worry about it. They'll take care of it. The danger with QAnon is what will happen if Biden's inaugurated. Well, how's that fit into the plan? I mean, is the military or the intelligence going to take care of it? There are groups of QAnon believers who are expecting the higher ups to take care of things. It's a self-fulfilling conspiracy theory. The real danger is what happens if it doesn't self-fulfill. Will they just scatter to the winds and not believe in it anymore? Or will they take matters into their own hands? The Proud Boys, they are spoiling for a fight. They're very, very excited about being the foot soldiers of this thing. That's what they were created to be. That's who they are. They're very interested in getting out in the streets and asserting their will and making the future in their direction through violence and intimidation. The MAGAs, they think this whole thing's going to get fixed. They think Trump is an absolute genius and he's going to figure this thing out. So, I've seen some things that are really problematic and really worrisome, and it is it's only getting worse. I have to tell you, I don't see this stuff de-escalating. It has to be de-escalated. There has to be a massive effort to de-radicalize this country. I talk about this all the time. If you're interested in my thoughts on it, you can listen to the podcast. You can watch past live streams. I have thoughts on it. I think that you basically have to throw a bunch of money at the problem, and you have to get some industry in middle America, and you have to start giving some people some things to do. That's my thought on it. I think I keep saying, if you want people to believe in climate change, employ them to make wind turbines and solar panels. De-radicalization is everything. 100%. Robert, so many questions. Tell me about it. I'll offer this. Is Trump totally screwed now, or is there some way the audio released in his favor because we're still living in bizarro America? Oh, his supporters see that audio as being evidence that he actually believes that the election was stolen from him. It's him trying to intimidate somebody to, get his will carried out. So no, that didn't hurt him at all with his supporters. There wasn't one supporter whatsoever that heard that and was like, "Oh no, that's bad. I don't know." They saw him trying to intimidate somebody and get his and get his will carried out. So no, he's not screwed with them. Kirsten, can you comment on Mark Meadows' part in the tape? Is there any liability for him? Maybe. Mark Meadows was involved in this whole thing. I mean, he went right along with it, which, by the way, should scare the shit out of everybody. He's one of the people that was like, no, we probably shouldn't carry out a military coup. But he's sure as hell into trying to intimidate a Secretary of State into recalculating the elections. Mark Meadows might have some skin in the game now. He might be in some trouble. But then again, are there consequences for people like this? Not really. There should be, but there hasn't been. So it's hard to, it's hard to say. Linda. Okay, we're getting up to 60 minutes here. After listening to the full WAPO tape, seems like the GOP will contest if they lose both either, I assume, the special election of those 2 Georgia seats due to Trump's belief of election fraud. Will that hold them up being seated? Probably. I think at this point, I would probably say my money right now is is on both of them winning, Warnock and Ossoff, right now, I think is what I would say, is what I would bet on. The Republicans are absolutely going to claim it's voter fraud. It's everything that they need to do, and they'll wave the bloody shirt, and they'll claim it's a conspiracy. All right, we're about there at 60 minutes. We're going to drain this glass and keep going. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cheers, everyone. Yeah, I think we're probably looking at the two Democrats winning. And even if it's just one, I think we're having the same conversation, which is that I think the Republicans are just going to claim that it was stolen. And the Republicans, because they can't win anything anymore and they have to embrace these conspiracy theories, I think they're just going to dive into it. And they'll talk about Dominion, all this stuff. I went and cast my ballot last week. I think it was on the 31st is when I did it, New Year's Eve. And I just saw the Dominion machine that you put your ballot in. And I was just like, oh, God, they're going to keep doing this thing. They're just going to keep going down that road. Yeah, they'll contest it. Absolutely. That's who they are. That's what they have to do. They cannot pretend like anything is an actual rebuke of them. And Dominion, the people of Dominion have already started to push back against this, which is what needs to happen. Franklin Lake Girl, if the Dems pull off wins in both Georgia Senate races, do you think the GOP will still go full-throated treason in D.C. on Wednesday? Proud Boys even angrier and more desperate. Absolutely. Yeah. But I will say, I think maybe this will be a situation where I think best case scenario is probably that Warnock and Ossoff win, but the election is not called until the 7th. If it gets called the night of the 5th or early on the 6th, that could lead to escalating tensions. The best case scenario for everyone is that it actually gets pulled off the day after. I think that would probably be the best case scenario because I think that would actually fuel tensions a little bit. Wonga, how to respond to sometimes quite well-meaning and sensible people who insist the system will correct and Trump is just a clown and an aberration. Okay, so I keep talking about this. There are three prongs to all of this stuff. First and foremost, you have to get educated. You have to have a working understanding of history. You have to know where we've been and where we are to know where we're going. So the first things first, if you want to have conversations with these people, you have to introduce yourself to the actual trajectory and history of the country. What has actually happened? Because here's the problem. Everything that we know or that we have known has been just edited and propagandized and twisted and turned. And what has ended up happening is we now live in a twisted facsimile of like our actual condition and situation, which I didn't know. I knew a lot about politics. I knew a lot about history, but I don't think I knew actual politics or actual history until the last few years. And what I ended up finding was that so much of this is illusory and so much of this is spectacle and show and puppetry. One of the things that's really interesting, and I've been writing about this recently, and if you don't know about it, go check out Plato's Allegory of the Cave, which is all about the difference between education and ignorance. And if you learn about that, all of a sudden you start to realize that a lot of what we watch is a lot of show and a lot of puppetry. If you know actual history, and if you actually introduce yourself to these elements and understand what has happened and where we are now, you can have informed conversations about what is actually happening as opposed to just trading talking points, which goes nowhere because it's not true. It's red versus blue, left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. And those things aren't real. Those things aren't real. And again, the Republican Party is just off the charts, fascistic and disgusting and anti-democratic. And they need to go away. They've reached their terminal point. But that doesn't mean the Democratic Party is perfect. It doesn't mean that because the Democratic Party is not perfect. They're not the same thing. This isn't both sidesism. This isn't whataboutism, any of that stuff. You have to actually understand where both sides of the argument are and what actual reality is. So if you actually know history, then what you understand is that America has not worked. And America has been about inequality. It is about the difference between the powerful and the powerless, and the back and forth between those two things. This is a giant problem. If you want to have a conversation with people who think the system works, show them that the system has never worked. The system has never worked. You want to talk about the powerful and the wealthy? They have driven this country into the ground one time after another. One time after another. The Constitution didn't work from the very beginning. The Constitution almost fell apart in the election of 1800 when populism reared its ugly head. It lasted a couple of years and then it almost fell apart. And our economy has just crashed into the damn ground over and over again because the powerful and the wealthy can't help themselves. The system doesn't work as it is constructed. The closest we've ever got, more or less, was either at the turn of the 20th century or after the Great Depression with FDR and the New Deal. Those are the closest moments that we've had to the system actually even beginning to work. And then immediately after World War II, the right and the Republican Party started to try and dismantle the New Deal. And they tried to, reinforce white supremacy and economic elitism. None of this stuff actually works. It doesn't actually work. That's the damnedest thing about this. So if you want to have conversations with people, understand what has happened, and then you can have an actual conversation with them, and then you have the power of truth on your side. If you have the power of truth on your side, you win actual arguments. The problem is that we've been having illusory rhetorical arguments. We haven't been talking about truth. We've been talking about facsimiles of truth. We've been using talking points. We've been using rhetorical bullet points. We have to have actual conversations. That's the difference. Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Okay, there's two here, actually. Actually, I missed one. Charlie says, can Trump remain in power and invoke martial law? Possibly. I mean, he could try anything. Would Trump or Pompeo initiate a conflict with Iran? The problem here with Iran is they keep trying to provoke Iran to attack them. They've been sending planes over left and right, hoping that they'll attack them. But Iran's like, oh my God, back off. Even the one-upsmanship we had in Iraq not too long ago, which I have to tell you, I was in Washington, D.C. when that Iraq thing was really bubbling over. Holy shit, that was a rough day to be in Washington, D.C. They're just you need to chill out. We do not want a war with you. And Trump is just oh, you don't want a war? Here's a plan. Here's this. Here's that. So they're trying to provoke Iran into an action, and Iran is we'll deal with the guy after you. They're not biting on his provocations. John Moore, and these are two questions that are related. What's your opinion on the likelihood of a schism in the GOP? Vivaldi's Four Seasons says, do you think there's any chance that true conservative Republicans like Romney choose to start a conservative caucus or caucus with Democrats? So the schism in the GOP is not going to probably cause a giant rift in the GOP. You've probably seen all of the people who are going to leave the GOP have already left the GOP, and those are the Lincoln Project people, the Never Trumpers, the former Republicans who are now, trying to tell Democrats who to elect and what to do with their politics, which is a problem. No, I don't think Romney's going to leave the Republican Party. I don't think the Republican Party is necessarily going to have a schism. I think Trumpism is going to win over the party. And time again, we saw this particularly with the Tea Party in 2010, when the Tea Party, which, by the way, was a completely constructed, conspiracy theory-minded, artificial movement that was created, funded, directed, piloted, focused, weaponized by the Koch brothers to get rid of regulations and taxes and make this country more and more libertarian. With the Tea Party, we saw that the Republican Party recognized that they can lose part of their base, and so they just swallowed the Tea Party. And they became the Tea Party, and they just moved further right. They're going to do that with Trumpism. They're going to do that with QAnon. They cannot help themselves. They're not going to wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and be like, come on now, let's do better. They're not going to say, we know that Joe Biden. We know that Joseph Robinette. I think is Joe Biden's middle name. We've worked with him before. We can trust him. They're not going to do that shit. They're going to dive deeper and deeper into the abyss. That's who they are. That's what they're going to do. It's where they're going. And they need to go away. They need to jump deep into the abyss and go away. They cannot continue. They have reached the terminal point of their existence. The Whigs went away. The Federalists went away. The Republican Party needs to go away. Bring in the Lincoln Party. Bring in the People's Party. I don't know. Call them something else. The Republican Party has to stop. It has to go. Has to go. Moo Young says, do you see a way for Dems to use the GOP's ideology of fear and blame to help use the Republican schism against these fascists, essentially turning the monster back on Dr. Frankenstein? Absolutely. The door is wide open. The thing about Trumpism, and this is important, is that Trump lied about everything, but Trump took advantage of truths that nobody else wanted to talk about. This is how Trump became the Republican nominee. He went on stage and said, all these assholes are liars. All these assholes are liars, except for me. You know, they're not actually, they don't mean what they're saying when they go on Fox News. They're liars. I'm the one who's not a liar. That was important. He also said, you know what? These people, they're rich people, which is crazy they did this. And he's like, they're not helping you. They're not out to help you. I'll help you. It was faux populism. He didn't actually mean to help working class people. He just knew that he could get white working class people and redirect their anger. They didn't know who to be angry at, and he said, be angry at these people of color, liberals, whatever you want to say. The door is wide open right now for the left to embrace economic populism and have a rising tide lifts all boats. That is absolutely something they could do right now, because the Republican Party has no idea. They can't tell their ass from their elbow when it comes to helping people and actually talking to working class people. I mean, have you ever seen Ted Cruz put on hunting gear? He has no idea what he's doing. David Perdue has to pay somebody to teach him how to wear a denim coat. All right? They have to pretend to be populist. They have no idea what they're doing. If the left could embrace that, if they could figure out how to talk to people and the people that they left behind in the 1980s, 1990s, when the Democratic Party said, you know what, we need to accept republicanism and we need to find corporate donors and we need to find wealthy donors. Don't worry about unions. Don't worry about people of color. Don't worry about those marginalized communities. And that is what actually happened in the 1980s and 1990s with the Democratic Party. If you read American Rule, which, why haven't you already? What are you doing? If you read American Rule, the Democratic Leadership Council went on the record and they said, we're not worried about people of color. We're not worried about labor unions. We're not worried about poor people and workers anymore. They kept saying that over and over and over again. They need to re-embrace that. There is an opening right now with this schism between Trump and the Republican Party. There's that much of a lane right now. And if the Democratic Party or the left could get in that lane and start talking to those people again, throw some money at them. Have them make solar panels. Have them make wind turbines. Have them make energy alternatives. Have them make electric cars. I don't give a shit. Give them some jobs. If they have some jobs and they have some money, they're not going to be out in the streets marching with the fucking Proud Boys. Fucking put them to work. FDR did it with the CCC. Give them a purpose. Holy shit. It's not that hard. It's not that fucking hard. So yeah, there's plenty of room for them to drive right through that. There's room for a fucking Mack truck to drive right through it and rediscover their souls. There's room for progressivism. There's room for populism. There's room for an honest-to-God discussion on economic inequality in this country. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. It's an absolute disgrace that they won't work on this. Give them a purpose. Matt, what are you working on? I'm writing a new book. It's been weird having to follow this shit. I'm basically writing it's a sequel to American Rule. I am writing a new history of modern history and Western civilization. I'm on. I just finished up with the Middle Ages, and I'm to the Age of Discovery. Man, Columbus, real piece of shit. I'll give you a quick little thing I learned about Columbus. So we all know he sucked, right? We all know that he, sailed from Spain and then, enslaved people. Number one, Columbus thought he was a messiah. He thought he was a Christ-like figure, which I did not know. And also, he was such a terrible governor in what he called Hispaniola that they actually put him in chains and arrested him and shipped him back to Spain. And he was like one of the most famous heroes in the world. He did such a terrible job. He was such a tyrant as governor that they arrested him and shipped his ass back to Spain. He was terrible, Columbus. And then before he died, he wrote a book of Christian revelations, because of course he did, talking about the apocalypse and the need to find, the Garden of Eden or whatever the hell he was looking for. So right now I'm on to the Age of Discovery. I'm learning right now about, basically what I'm learning is how power and economic inequality have traveled throughout generations and time and through the different eras, and how one crisis begets movement and power and inequality. It's hard not to talk about it all the time. I'm learning a lot. While I'm doing it. So that's what I'm working on right now. Thank you for asking that. Michael Brown movement. Not sure of your position on this, but I disagree with those people who are telling other people to stay home. Those who have been protesting in D.C. for months need our support. Okay, going back to what we were saying. I cannot tell people in good faith to go out and get their heads split open by the Proud Boys. That being said, that there are protest movements who are out there fighting. They are out there fighting. We have to work on a movement that has an ideological center of gravity. We have to have a purpose. And being out there and just resisting fascism is one thing, but we need to be able to resist fascism and have a movement or a momentum. I would say right now for January 6th, I would not be out there. But I would say that eventually we're going to have some sort of a center of gravity where we're going to have to be out there. There's a lot to go. There's a lot that we need to do. There's a lot that we really, really need to set up and get momentum for. There's a lot. Lewis Hall, should we be prepared to hit the streets on January 6th? Absolutely. We should be prepared for anything. And if they cross that firewall, if they go from pretend coup to actual coup, absolutely. We need to be ready to do whatever. Janelle Forsyth, what do you think is the course of action on January 6th should be? I'm seeing a lot of debate on whether people should stay home or counter-protest. Stay at home and watch what's happening and be ready. That's what I would say, because there's no telling what exactly we're looking at and what these people are capable of. I would not put money right now on any scenario. It's the throwing up of the cards and seeing what lands. Andrea says, sometimes it seems we simply don't have representative government. We absolutely don't. We have the facsimile of representative government. Maybe Congress doesn't care about American sovereignty, security, because they represent something or someone else, not us. If that were true, how can voting fix that when they don't seem to respect our votes? I talked about this the other day, and Andrea, if you're watching this or listening to this, you can go back and check. I did a live stream the other day when Mitch McConnell blocked the COVID stimulus payments. Here's the whole point. Our government has been taken over by an economic consensus between the left and the right, the Republicans and the Democrats, that says, you know what, the wealthy should have all the money and all the power, and hopefully it'll trickle down, maybe it'll help people out. That has been the consensus now for decades. And it happened when Reagan won re-election in the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Leadership Council was like, we need to be Republicanism with a human face. What we fight about are cultural issues. We fight about, whether a person should have, the right to choose, or where a person goes to the bathroom, or if you can be fired from your job from being an LGBTQ American. We fight about those things, those cultural sort of things. But we're not actually fighting over economics. That's the problem. And these people are not there to take care of you. They are there to make sure that the government serves the whims of the powerful and the wealthy. Now, that doesn't mean you should give up on voting, but it does mean that we need to take a more active role in figuring out the people that we send into the belly of the beast. What history tells us is when we form solidarity, when we talk to one another, when we trust one another, that we can start creating a progressive movement that can start to change things. And it happens quick. It happens really, really quickly. Matt says, we agree the system is fundamentally rotten. How do we replace it? Well, there's two ways. We either do the hard work of creating an infrastructure of political change, and we put people who are there for reform. I actually think, I've been thinking about this a lot. I was talking about this earlier today. I think we need a reform movement. I think we need a movement that's just like, hey, send all these people to Washington, D.C. We're going to get term limits. We're going to get rid of Citizens United. We're going to get rid of money in politics, all of that stuff. I think we need a reform movement is what we need. The other option is revolution. And revolutions are messy, and sometimes you don't end up on the right side of a revolution. I would say let's change it. Let's have a progressive movement, and let's put some people in there who are going to change some things. Zachary Tinney says, I really hate to think about another election right now, but if Democrats don't win in Georgia, or even if they do, the majority will be tight. What's the next move? You got to build infrastructure. Over and over and over again, you got to build infrastructure. I'm so sorry. That's not the most fun answer whatsoever, but we can't just show up every 4 years. We can't keep throwing our money at consultants who are just going to put out the same damn ads and email the same damn emails. We have to create an infrastructure of change and a movement. We have to have a lot of people in there. Oh, Rebecca K., I completely agree that the cultural is economic. The two are intertwined. What they end up doing is they end up combining the cultural with the economic while never giving you the possibility of changing the economic. Though that's the argument that we're having right now in our politics, is you can make incremental change culturally, but you can't make it fully economic. You can never actually start to change this thing and move it left or in any sort of a direction that makes it more fair. Pino says, how secure are the voting machines now? I don't have a damn clue how secure they are. What a mess. We should have better elections. We're supposed to be the most powerful, wealthy country in the world. And the fact that we can't actually make our elections safe is just absolute horseshit. Sauce, this goes along with it. Can we burn it down and start all over? I don't think there's any fixing this level of corruption, greed, or lack of humanity. I actually think that we can. I think that we can make a change. I actually see change starting to happen. The conversations I've been having, the conversations I've been seeing people have, people are more informed and energized and actually educated about this stuff. People aren't just having the red versus blue, Republican versus Democrat conversation anymore. They're having actual conversations about history with context and stuff. I actually think that things are getting better, but we have to form a movement. We can't just wait on messiahs to show up and make it better. Groggy says, hi, Jared, what are your thoughts about the Secret Service switching up agents for Joe Biden's security detail because of concerns over some agents' allegiances to Trump? This is one of the most fucked up things I've heard in a long time. And that should really concern people. The fact that, like, we think about these, like, public servants, there's no way that they could possibly have any sort of a bias or, you know, some sort of a dangerous idea. We know that's not true. And we need to start thinking about it. We need to start thinking about the fact that, like, law enforcement, they're not just like servants. You know, they're not like made in a laboratory. They're human beings. They're human beings. And they have biases. And that's a dangerous thing. This Secret Service thing, I'm glad that they figured out that there were some people who weren't going to, you know, necessarily carry out their functions. But that should also just, like, you know, send a fire up people and understand how dangerous this is. Blue Inferno over here on the side says, what do you mean by investing in infrastructure of change? What I mean is this. Our politics right now, basically every 4 years or every 2 years, whatever it is, you basically have an election and then it's just like, donate to me, send money to me, do whatever. And this is how you have people who raise hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, you know, you had in South Carolina and Kentucky, you had two races that brought in record number of contributions, and it wasn't even close in these places. And the reason is because in South Carolina and Kentucky, you do not have an infrastructure of Democrats on the ground who have been making connections, working in communities. You don't have the local moving into the state, into the national. The Democratic Party has done a terrible job, awful job, of investing in all of these states and actually making like these connections and the solidarity that you can have there. Howard Dean, for a long time when he was the head of the DNC, that was his big thing, the 50 state initiative, and eventually that led to the election of Barack Obama. All of a sudden, you start seeing Obama winning in states that he never would have won in before, and it happened because they were investing in states that most of the time are written off. Right? They're not in winning places. There's a massive political consultant infrastructure in place right now, and that's what you saw again in Kentucky, and you saw it in South Carolina. You see it all over the place, where Democrats want to change things, and so they flood regions to beat people like Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, and then they just take our money and they give them to their TV friends and their internet friends, and then they just share the wealth around. It doesn't actually change anything. If you want to know how this stuff works or how it should work, yeah, that's right. If you want to know how this should work, Stacey Abrams is the number one figurehead for this stuff. Stacey Abrams has showed that if you actually get talented people on the ground and you work at it and work at it and work at it, you can actually build an infrastructure of change. That's why Georgia went blue for Joe Biden, and why there's a very real possibility that Georgia is going to vote for Ossoff and Warnock, is because they put in the work and the time. You can change all of these people, and you can boot Republicans out, and you can find reform candidates and progressive candidates, but you have to invest the time and energy and money in these things. It can't just be show up every 4 years and throw money at the problem. That doesn't work. You can't buy votes. You actually can't buy votes. You can buy people not to vote for people, but you can't buy votes. You have to create infrastructure and change and trust. Connection is key. That's exactly right. Sorry, Archer says, Trump et al. Have been destroying docs all along. Could Biden ask the interpreter whose notes Trump confiscated if she kept a copy of what was discussed in the meeting with Putin? That's a hell of a question. I have not heard that approached yet. I think we're going to have one of those situations. I know that you know this. I'm sure that you've seen, like in the past few years, something comes up. It's like a new recording from the Nixon archive. It just came out, like 2 or 3 years ago, that Nixon was meeting with Reagan, and Reagan was using like a bunch of racial slurs and terminology towards black people. We're going to be finding out stuff left and right that Trump did wrong. What Sari asked is, like, could Biden ask an interpreter what was actually said between Trump and Putin? I think we're going to be piecing together the corruption and the crimes of the Trump administration for a long time, maybe decades, probably decades. Alex, I don't even know what to make of the vandalism on Pelosi's house. Obviously, I know this is a topic with no real information as of yet, but do you have a take on it? Yeah, I do. You had people vandalizing Pelosi's house, and then you had people vandalizing McConnell's house. I actually feel like this is one of those situations where you can almost confidently call it a false flag operation. It was probably like agent provocateurs of the right who were trying to frame progressive agents. It was probably people on the right who were trying to make it look like progressives or Antifa or whatever you want to call it. They were doing it to make it look like the people on the right or the people on the left were dangerous and radical and all that stuff. It felt very fabricated to me. It felt very much like a forced false flag type bullshit. I think about a lot. When I was an undergrad and I was taking political science classes, I think about a lot. There was this kid, and we were in poli-sci class, and like one day we were having a conversation about how to, deal with Cuba or something, and how to form political and public relations with them. And this kid raised his hand. He's like, we should send one of our ships down there and blow it up in their harbor and start a war. And the professor just kind of stared at him. I was like, what is wrong with you? There are people out there, rat fuckers, Roger Stone, people like him. That's who it is. Oh, I think that tape was leaked by the Georgia representatives. I 100% think that they saw Trump came up on their phone. They're like, "Hey, hit record." That was absolutely the Republican GOP. Absolutely, 100%. Travis Alford, I'm curious how we've only got two more. Curious how local TV news and newspapers are covering the sedition tapes. How will it impact the Georgia Senate races? Local news doesn't really talk about this stuff. I think you all know this. They're like, an interesting thing happened today and it was released, and then they play it with absolutely no context. Local news has been completely defanged, unfortunately. There's a couple of them that are pretty good, but yeah, they haven't been handling it very well. Alfonso, with all the crap, with all the fascists getting exhausting, I'll just ask you, who are your Super Bowl teams this year? Put me down for Kansas City and Seattle. I think that's what I would say. I don't know. Make predictions all the time. They've been pretty right recently. So before I say goodbye tonight, quick update. So we're going to have a new episode of the Muckrake Podcast come out on Tuesday. We're going to start putting the second episode behind the Patreon firewall. So if you want a second episode of the Muckrake Podcast every week, all you have to do is go over to patreon.com/Muckrake Podcast. Not to mention, you have an amazing community of people over there that you can get to know. These are actually good people, and like you can start to build communities and get to know other people, and start being there for other people and engage in actual solidarity. The Bourbon talks. I think what I'm going to do. I talked about this last week. I think I'm going to start doing these bi-weekly, every other Sunday, and I'm going to start doing more videos during the week, reacting to things that are actually happening. That way we can start to make this a little bit more fluid, a little bit more pliable, so I can react to things as opposed to waiting for the end of the week. So I think we'll do these episodes, the Bourbon Talk at 8 p.m. Eastern. I think we'll do these every other week with a lot more of live streams that are reacting to what's going on. I think that's what we're going to do from here on out. And maybe I'll change my mind, then I'll do them every week. Who in the living hell knows? But I want to tell you, I really want to make this year better. I have decided that this is going to be the year of not just diagnosing the problem, but finding answers. I've kind of held back a little bit sometimes in talking about how I think I would want to change things and how I would want to make things better. And I think in a way I have... I've done that because there's like this old journalistic sort of mentality to it. And I think there's also been, just to be frank, and I'm glad you're all hanging out for the end of this, just to be honest and engage in that intimacy, is it's like one of those things where, I've had to educate myself on this and start to understand what's going on. And it's almost like I haven't trusted myself to kind of put myself out there in terms of fixing it, the prescriptions. And I've educated myself enough to understand how to diagnose it, but now it's time that I trusted myself to prescribing. And so that's what I'm going to do. And that's what we're going to do this year. I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about this stuff. I'm going to do a lot of live streams during the week to react to things. If you haven't already subscribed to this feed, please do so, because I'm going to be on here a lot more often. And I will be back. So it looks like I'll be back on the 17th. God knows, I might be pulled back in right when I was trying to get out. But going to do a lot more of these live streams during the week, and a lot more of these talks. I really appreciate you. And I know that this is a frightening moment. And somebody said, it's like, somebody said, I'm stressed. I'm stressed too. Just knowing what's going on and understanding it and framing it doesn't make you feel less stressed or less scared. It's terrifying. This is a really frightening thing. As we get to the 6th, it's a really frightening, stressful moment. But we've got each other. We've got this thing. We're fighting back. We're gonna defeat fascism. We really gonna do it. But you got to be aware. You have to be vigilant. You have to be. You have to fight. You have to fight. And I believe in you, and knowing that you're around and you have my back makes all of the difference in the world. I love you all very much. Thank you so much. I will see you probably in the next couple of days. Cheers to you. Cheers to 2021.